That's exactly right.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So, we are talking about newsletters, and I know
Hmm.
that you want to start a newsletter. You haven't done it yet, and that's where we figured you and I would connect, and maybe I can coach you through it. How's that sound?
Yeah, it sounds amazing. I'm looking forward to it because starting is the most difficult part of anything, I think, for me
Yeah.
anyway.
I mean, it is often, right? I'm a very like hard starter and like I'm a strong finisher. It like takes me a while to settle in, so I can relate to that. Well, when it comes to the newsletter, what is it you want like from the newsletter? Why do you want to start one?
Well, I guess first and foremost, if I had to boil it down, I would say I want to connect with people on a level that they feel there's value in it for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I, of course, yeah, so that's really what I want. I want to be able to connect with people so that they find value. And I realize that, an email is a really quick way to do that. And I realize that using the power of email, let's say, and an email list, you can connect with more people, whether or not they want to work with you.
Mm-hmm.
But just to be able to give value to people who might need it for any moment, almost like an act of kindness, maybe. Um, yeah.
I
So
mean,
like an
I
act of
know
kindness.
I know a little bit like about you that you have built businesses before, but you are actually new to the health and wellness space, and you are working on your level one certification, or you finished it.
I finished it in January.
Amazing, congrats.
Yeah.
So now you're looking to like start a coaching business. Is like this is something that you're doing right now? Are you currently working with any clients?
Yeah. So I started working with clients as soon as well, actually, you know what? I started working with clients before my certification
Amazing.
um, a couple of years ago. And when I say clients, it was mostly friends and family who saw results that I had achieved myself.
Yeah.
Um, and that kind of drove me into precision nutrition when I found myself unemployed for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
Yep. And so then I just Googled and I fell down a rabbit hole and precision nutrition came out on top. And so that's how it all started. And so once I got the certification, I gained a little bit more confidence and started to reach out to people who I thought might be interested rather than waiting for people to come to me.
Hmm.
So right now, I would say I probably have about 15 clients.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
And
So I'm really like pumped by it.
the newsletter feels like the next step for you.
Yeah, it does feel like the next step. And like, I think you know that I have ADHD, right? So
Mhm.
one of my problems is getting started and perfectionism and all of that stuff and feeling like every step is the next step. And oh shit, this is overwhelming. I'm just going to like sit in the quicksand and pretend that I'm trying to get things done by falling down rabbit holes of nutrition podcasts.
Yeah, and I mean, how do you find like how does ADHD play into this for you? I think a lot of the things you've mentioned, I think a lot of people even without ADHD will so be able to relate to. ADHD obviously like cranks the dial up more, right? And I mean, if nothing else, I'm thinking of you as somebody who's probably also working in like high highs and low lows. Like it's not a steady, straight line, like do this every single day. Say more.
Yeah. So that part of it, yeah, you nailed it. It's manic almost. And I am either doing everything and I'm excited. And anybody who comes near me while I'm doing it, I want to share it with them and like bestow wisdom on them and help them. Or I'm, sitting in my bedroom watching the Huberman Lab and falling into nutrition rabbit holes that can last 4 hours or
Yeah.
more, sometimes entire days, no concept of time. And I feel like what you said, you nailed it particularly well when you said that I think people can relate. And I think in today's society, whether or not you have ADHD, the distraction in our world today is so great that you might not be diagnosed with it, but you're battling focus and attention, whether or not you have a diagnosis, right? So my company that I started is called Focused Health and Wellness.
Oh, I love that.
Which really came about in a funny way because I didn't come up with the name. My daughter and my husband did. And I like life, the universe has a way of bringing you things. And so that name was really perfect. And then I had to think about a logo. And of course, like I said, I'm bouncing all over the place. Where do I start? I have all this passion. And my logo is similar to the precision nutrition. The wheel with the 6 pillars of health.
Yeah.
So obviously I'm not going to copy off of precision nutrition, but for some reason it resonated with me.
Yeah.
So my logo, and I'm Irish and I really love my roots. So I developed a Celtic flower. And again, I didn't do it. My sister did it for a Yeti cup. She designed it and it was just perfect. And I said, can I use this for my logo? So it's 6 petals, representing the 6 pillars of health. And then the center petal rather, it's all black. And the center petal is like a nice calming bluish green. And to me, that represents like due north for when I lose my focus. And the center of it is devoid of any color, which is where the peace and the harmony and the focus lie. If you pay attention to the 6 pillars of health, you get to have that.
I love the meaning behind it. I appreciate you sharing a little bit. And I think to kind of take you back to there's this newsletter piece, there's you building the business piece, you have this super meaningful name and logo. And I'm also thinking of some of the challenges that you will experience and encounter. And I think of it even less in terms of ADHD, not to diminish the diagnosis and take away from it, but rather to kind of think of these struggles that you will experience and maybe already experienced as a business owner and a coach trying to build this thing is, I often overthink things. I often overanalyze things. I have lots of ideas all the time, right? So you stop me if anything is not correct, right? Because I'm sort of hypothesizing here a little bit just based on my experience working with folks with ADHD as well. So there's lots of ideas and also sometimes feeling overwhelmed as to where to start. You've mentioned perfectionism. And you notice also there's a bit of a disconnect for somebody who functions in these waves of energy to consider starting something that is very linear, or maybe is supposed to be very linear. Like we think of a newsletter, I'm going to start a newsletter and now I have to do it once a week or once a month. And that feels that can feel almost claustrophobic a little bit. Does that resonate?
Yeah, all of the above. And so, for example, I was determined to send out an email unrelated to, let's say, that little golden nugget of helping people and a little bit of gratitude and sharing, that kind of a thing, but related to my business. I haven't done it. It's 3 days. It's a simple email, but instead of just sending the damn email and letting the professional marketer who's going to be working with me handle the rest, I'm thinking, well, I have to make sure I include everything and I have to make sure she understands where my vision is. That's so stupid. Do I really expect her to get that out of an email? You know what I mean? That's what a conversation is for. So yeah. So everything that you said, all of the above resonates. And, sitting down for any length of time and doing it, I've been avoiding it, I think.
Well, and then I'm thinking of maybe just approaching it a little bit differently and giving yourself the freedom to approach it differently. Because we can think of, the newsletter best practices, but we can also think of Heather's best practices, and those might not line up perfectly or at all. And Heather's best practices will always take precedence over the generic recommended newsletter best practices. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah.
So one example I'll use with a newsletter, best practices, and I'm using air quotes here, is that you want to be very regular, very consistent on a predictable schedule where the readers know kind of when to expect hearing from you. That sounds
Mhm.
great in theory. I don't actually know that that will map on super well with how you function as a person.
Right.
So consider, like, what if you were able to give yourself permission to not stick to like a super rigid militant schedule where a newsletter goes out on Monday, but still send it out regularly enough. I think of the frequency like it has to be regular enough for people not to forget about you altogether.
Right.
So, one schedule I might recommend, what if you were to send out one newsletter a month,
Mhm.
but it didn't have to be a particular day?
Right.
How does that feel? Like just as a schedule compared to every Monday I send out a newsletter?
Well, I think it takes the anxiety out of the calendar. Um, I think that when anxiety factors in for me and maybe for other people, rather than doing the thing, you get stuck in the knowing part or the thinking part anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So you want to do this thing, but this idea of a regular schedule gives you anxiety. So rather than do the thing, you just actually avoid it.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you even fool yourself into thinking that the things you're doing to avoid it are actually preparing to do the thing you should be doing.
Oh my goodness, totally. Can you think of some examples? Like the busy work, right?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean,
Exactly.
we find ourselves like taking courses on newsletter writing, or listening to podcasts on how to start a newsletter. You're nodding, right? Like, so all of the things that feel like they're moving us closer to actually having a newsletter. Meanwhile, it's kind of like reading a book about running without actually running.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Okay.
Absolutely. And it kind of keeps it dead in the water.
Yeah.
Right. And so if your goal, or let's say we talked about my due north, if my due north is to help people, then by occupying my time with stuff that allows me to pretend that I'm preparing, I'm actually not doing the thing.
Hmm.
And I'm not helping anybody, nor am I helping myself, which is maybe the most important thing. And I don't mean to set that in a selfish way. I mean that in the sense that the whole, excuse me, the whole oxygen mask analogy. If you're on a plane and it's going down and you don't put the oxygen mask on yourself, you're not going to save the person next to you. Now, I don't think my email is going to save anybody, but I think the
Well, you never
analogy,
know.
I
It's
think the analogy can
it's
play, plays, could be paralleled, I guess, is what I'm trying to say.
Your email might
Right.
save somebody. It definitely will not save anybody if you never send it. We know that much for sure,
Correct.
right? So,
Exactly.
well, I mean, to recap what we have so far, we know you want to send out a newsletter. We know you want to connect with people. We know you want to do this via email. So again, we're kind of back to newsletter as the thing. Um, you haven't done that yet. How does the frequency of about once a month without a rigid schedule feel for you?
Well, yeah. So I think that's where I started before to answer that. And then I went off on a path, which is so common of me. But I
Okay.
think it feels good to say that because it takes the anxiety out. If you take the anxiety is like quicksand.
Okay, so hold on. I'll pull you back, right? So, and because I just want us to nail down the frequency, and then we'll talk
Okay.
about the next action step. Does that feel good for
Got
you?
it. Yep,
Cool.
it does.
So if we were to say, like, Heather's going to send out her newsletter about once a month, she
Yep.
will never have to commit to a specific day of the month. And if you want to send out more than one a month, you're free to do that, because I think that would also respect like that, the fact that you come across ideas and feel passionate about them, and you can always communicate them to your list if you so choose. So does that feel good, like the frequency?
It does, because it, like, again, it takes the anxiety out of the equation, which, like I said, is like quicksand. And it also, hypothetically, I wake up with an idea, and that's typically how it happened. And I had this brilliant idea that I wake up with. It's my creative time during the day. And then I'll start watching videos about it and watching podcasts about
Mhm.
it. And I don't know, going on PN Nutrition and Googling the
Yes.
word and seeing what other great
Yes.
people have to
Yeah.
say. And I don't, and then I actually don't write it because I feel like it's never going to, I don't have enough information to make it good enough.
Okay. So
And
I
then I
think that
forget the
really,
idea.
that takes us to the next thing, right? Because so if we have like a frequency in mind, and I hope that that takes some pressure off, like takes the anxiety out. Also, I think it's once a month is pretty manageable for most people to kind of say, well, I can do it more frequently if I'd like, but I will commit to once a month. We're at the end of March when we're having this conversation. So if you were to send out your first newsletter in the month of April, and then another one in the month of May, and then another one in the month of June, and more if you have the space or desire to do that. But having that loose structure, I think next up we can talk about, well, now that we have that nailed down, what is the next thing that is stopping you? Like, let's start talking about your April newsletter, which will be your first one. Tell me, who
Okay.
is this newsletter going out to?
So right now I don't have any type of funnel set up. I don't have, I have it waiting in the wings for me, but I just haven't taken the next step to do that thing.
So let's
Um,
pause. Let's take the funnels out of the equation completely, and
yep,
we're gonna keep it ultra super simple. Like, so what would
got
this
it.
look like if this was like super easy and all of a sudden you have to send your first newsletter for whatever reason today? How would you do that? Who is it going out to?
I love it. It's like the lowest hanging fruit, Kate. I love it.
Exactly that.
I love it. So who would it go out to? It would go out to anybody who I currently have on my email list, who's friends and family that I love, and my current clients.
Amazing. So
That's it.
you have your email list, and I mean, the first newsletter is probably going to say something along the lines of, "Hey, I decided I'm going to start a somewhat regular newsletter. This is it. This is the first one. So if you would like to receive it in the future, hit reply and let me know."
Awesome.
And maybe 2 people will reply, maybe 12, maybe 72. However many people will reply creates your seed email list.
Yeah. It's incredible how you can be a PN1 graduate, right? And all of the principles that are kind of hanging right there in front of your face. When it
Mm,
comes to yourself, it's so hard to apply them, right? Or let's say, it's nutrition and it's the 6 pillars, right? And this all kind of plays in together. And it's just so interesting how you're able to kind of point out the lowest hanging fruit, the simplest thing, and like, why didn't I think of that? So
it's
thank you. That's
super
pretty neat.
obvious in retrospect, right? And
Yeah.
I always think of it like, this is not like, I think this is like human specific, not
Yeah.
like coaches clients specific, because I do the exact same thing. Like when I work with my coach, it's the most obvious things that I was like, of course it's that
It's
same thing.
always the most
It's
obvious
always
things.
the most
Why
obvious
is
stuff.
that the case?
But I really think of it as like, no matter how good you are at cutting hair, you're not going to be that good at cutting your own hair. Like the angle's wrong, right? Like
Oh, good point.
it's awkward, right? Like it doesn't. You could be the most talented hairstylist in the world. So, coaching others and coaching ourselves are two very different things. And it's like, what did they say? You can't tickle yourself.
Amazing. Awesome framing. I love it.
Yeah. So, okay. So we already have the idea of when the newsletter is going to go out, how often it's going to go out. We have an idea of who it's going to go out to. And we even have like kind of a loose idea of what it would say. Because the first newsletter, given that those folks did not like opt into the newsletter, you probably want to start by saying, hey, this is what it is. And do you want to get it in the future?
Right. Now, in something like that, Kate, should it just be like, hello, this is what I'm doing? Or should it have a little bit of, I guess, like a little nugget of what I can offer them? Or is that too quick to make a sales pitch?
Well, I mean, this isn't really like a sales pitch yet, right? It's more like
Gotcha.
this is, it is and it isn't, right? And I think this is the part where it's like, what feels good to you? Because I think giving a little bit of context as to where folks can make an informed decision as to whether they want to receive this or not, I think would be good. You could even approach it from like kind of two different perspectives where you could just simply start sending a regular communication to your
Mhm.
clients.
Mhm.
That's a list of 15 already, right? I think that they would love hearing from you. I don't think that's too far of a stretch. And as soon as you have that seed list, you can start talking to other folks about this thing that you're already doing.
Gotcha.
Okay, so yeah, I think that there's that initial communication of like, this is what I'm going to be doing pretty regularly, and this is what I will be talking about.
Right. I like that. And so I think, and based off of how we originally started the conversation about why I wanted to do it in the first place,
Mm-hmm.
now that you said that, I actually don't ever want my email to be a sales pitch ever.
Cool.
Maybe it'll just be um, a funnelness, and maybe I'm not using the right terminology, but if you want to know more, and then direct them to like a private Facebook page, which would also be free, but you have to become a member.
Well, and I think like again, like when we sort of talk about selling and like sales pitch or no sales pitch, these are just words, right? Because and it
Right.
really like what we make them mean. Because to
Mhm.
say I never want my newsletter to be a sales pitch, um, I think what you're saying is I never want my newsletter to feel that certain way.
Yes, that skeevy way that we think of when
Right?
it comes to pushy salespeople.
It's that, right? It's never about the sales pitch per se, because as soon as you said, hey, I'm writing a newsletter, does anyone want to receive it? That's a sales pitch.
Yep.
And there
Yep.
is
Yep.
nothing like particularly salesy about it. The newsletters that I've received, that I've signed up for, I love receiving them. That's amazing. That's why I signed up, right? Like that's the whole point. I raised my hand and I said, please send me this information. So let's think about what is missing from the plan right now, right? Because you wanted to start the newsletter, you haven't yet, and now we have worked through a couple of the specifics together. What is
Yeah.
still missing for you in order to really put you on track to like that first newsletter is going out in April, maybe even April 1st?
Yeah. So I have an idea that I wanted to run by you, and you can tell me what you think, because it's been kind of like stewing for maybe a day or two. So because of the way that I work, and I'm either very focused or not at all. I either have time or I don't. I was thinking of using technology to aid me. And what I mean by that is like, let's say Microsoft Word or whatever platform. Hypothetically, I wake up with this great idea. Wonderful. Run upstairs, jot it down in Word or in notes, and then copy and paste it into Word and just leave it. Walk away and do whatever the hell you have to do. Work on it for as long as you feel, for as long as your focus will allow. And then maybe I'll go about my day or my month, and maybe 5 other things will come to me in that way, and I'll do the same thing. But on the day that I have a little bit more focus, one of those 5 things is resonating with me, and I feel more compelled to do that particular thing. And
Mm-hmm.
maybe I finish it that day, maybe I don't. But at the end of the day, I think that because the way I'm doing it now is I have all these brilliant ideas, and I'm like, oh my God, I have to share this with people. This is going to be so amazing. And then I'm like, what was that thought again? But if
Mm.
I do this continually, then I'll always have a reminder of the content that I felt passionate about at the moment. Whether or not it ever gives birth to a full email, who cares? Maybe it will, maybe it won't. What are your thoughts?
I love it. I mean, I'm hearing a couple of like couple of things that are very practical that we can problem solve through. One, I'm the person of many ideas. Goodness, I can relate to that, right? But then when it's time to actually express them or jot them down, they're gone, right? Like they in and out, and I'm on to the next thing. So the question there that I'm hearing is, how do I keep track of these ideas? And then the other one is this like notion of like, I have an idea and then I start like going down the rabbit hole of a thing and I start listening, reading, researching, but then that's sort of where that idea dies and it doesn't
Correct.
become anything else. So you hear how those are the two pieces that we would need to problem solve here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think the first piece, I'm wondering, like, if we were to go super, super simple, I'm picking up my smartphone, and I have an iPhone. Do you have a smartphone?
I do. I have an iPhone.
You have an iPhone as well. Do you use notes at all?
I do. I do.
So
I love it.
can you pick up your phone? Is it nearby?
Yep.
And honestly, I'll do this with you because I actually like this idea. So let's just create a brand new note together. So I'm just clicking on that little yellow thing at the bottom, and I'm going to call mine newsletter ideas.
Oh my God.
And there is
Kate,
already a note. Go ahead.
I have this in my phone already.
You have one in your phone. Can you open it up? Let's see what it says.
Yeah. Yes, I can. So what do you want me to do? Tell you what I have in here?
Give me like one idea that's in there already.
So gratitude and your why and how they're related, possibly
So pause.
exploring that.
Do you remember putting that in?
I do.
Do you remember what you were going to talk about?
Yes, I do. So, well, knowing your why, right, and its importance. And I have to say that while it made sense while I was taking the course from Precision Nutrition, doing it with my clients has to be the most powerful thing I've experienced as a coach. Because
so, hold on, because I want to make sure we don't like kind of go down the rabbit hole of fleshing out the topic, right? Quite yet, because
yep.
we're talking about like how do we keep the ideas in place. And you notice that when I said, ooh, maybe the problem is like, how does Heather capture her ideas? Let's use a note. And you're like, well, I already have a note. Okay, so that's not actually a problem. You already have a place where you are capturing your ideas. So what is the actual problem then?
I don't know. I guess if I had to say, okay, so to break it down real simple, I want it to be perfect because I don't want to be for it to be judged as being incorrect or not valuable or judgment. I think that if you boiled it all down.
So then I think that there are a couple of things. I think it's really more to do with like that second thing you've identified where like I have an idea and then I start like thinking and overthinking and I jot it down and I listen to things but then it never becomes a newsletter.
Mm-hmm.
It never actually materializes into a thing that I have created and I can move on to the next idea. And one thing, I mean, I can actually relate to that quite a bit. Is it okay if I share some personal experience?
Yeah, please do.
I have notes upon notes upon notes of ideas and drafts. And I have found that the sheer amount of ideas quite overwhelming at times. You can probably relate to that. And what I realized that I kind of have to do, I have to force myself into an idea for the next letter.
Okay.
The next letter is this one. I'm going to capture other things. I'm going to keep having ideas, but my next newsletter is going to be on gratitude because that's what I've decided it's going to be on. And that's, I said, give me one, right? You opened it up and you're like, gratitude and your why. So, and you notice what that does, like the little trick is I can write about anything, but the next thing I'm going to write about is this.
Right.
That way you only have one thing to write about and focus on, regardless of how many thousands ideas you may have at the same time. And that way you kind of have to sit down and make this one happen before you run around with, right? Like you're shaking your head because
I'm shaking my head because opening up that app and looking at my list, I feel anxious just seeing it because I'm like, I haven't done the thing.
Yeah. So if we were to just grab this one, you
Mhm.
notice how that in itself is also like very liberating, where you can like let the rest drop
Yeah.
for now.
For
Yeah,
now. Yeah.
you're
Oh
laughing,
my
right?
God.
It's a huge relief.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. Absolutely.
they're all there. Those thousands of ideas are there. And knowing you even a little bit, I know that you will have thousands more,
Yeah.
right? But all we need is one that
Hmm.
you're going to work on next. That's it.
That's it.
That's it. So now you notice we have the frequency, the date, we have who it's going out to, and we even have the topic,
Right.
right? You're going to write about gratitude and your why. You remember putting
Hmm.
that idea down, you can flesh it out
Hmm.
and see where that takes you.
Yeah.
What's next? Is there anything else that is like the sticking point? That's something that will
Okay.
prevent this from happening.
So this is a big one because I
Yeah,
already know what the answer is to that question.
say it. What is it?
So yeah, so I want to identify with people, right? And
Mhm.
in order to do that and do it well and do it efficiently and compassionately, you have to be real.
Hmm.
It can't be some bullshit. You have to be human, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Be real and be human. And so if I'm going to talk about my why to people,
Mm-hmm.
then I'm going to have to tell them my why. And my why is going to cause me to be emotional and put myself out there in a way that maybe
Mm-hmm.
people, I'm a very guarded person, very guarded. Everything is always okay. I have a great sense of humor. I can make people laugh just about anywhere in any situation because I protect what's really happening. I
Mm-hmm.
don't share that much. So I guess the next hurdle would be opening up about my why and revealing really what's behind the curtain is a little
Mm.
scary.
Well, so here, let me just point something out here for you. Because you said, I have to be human. You have no choice but be human. You cannot be a robot if you tried, because
Yeah.
you're human, as far as I know, right? And just by being here, you're being human. You don't need to human in a particular way.
Right.
You're with me, right? Like, so
I'm
maybe
there.
that could be one extra thing that we just take off your plate. Try to be human. Like, you're human already. You're there. You got it.
Right.
You got this one. You got this one done and done. It's a check and check. But then, and I understand what you're talking about. But I really want to point out how many assumptions you have strung in a row there. And because it's like, well, if I am going to do a newsletter, I have to be real. And if I am going to be real, I have to do this. And if I'm going to do this, I have to spill my guts. And if I have spilled my guts, then I'm going to be anxious. And I don't know if people, it's like, wow, that's a lot of ifs. Right? Run. Like, we're just talking about little email about gratitude.
Right.
Okay. So maybe, what if, hear me out, it's a
Yeah.
radical idea. What if you didn't need to spill your guts in the very first email that you write?
Right.
Can we maybe do that?
Yeah, we can.
Can you just reserve the right to spill your guts a little bit later in your newsletter journey?
I can, right? I yes, I can. I really, really, really can. However, I want people to know my why.
Mm,
There's such a conflict there. I'm
yeah.
terrified to share it, but I want people to know my why.
Hold on. Um, they will. They will know
Okay.
you are. You will share it. All I'm saying is it doesn't have to be right now, because you notice
Gotcha.
how your brain sets up this perfect set of circumstances that prevent you from doing anything. I want to
Yeah.
write this newsletter, but if I'm going to write it, I have to be real. And if I'm going to be real, I have to share my why. And my why is terrifying, and I'm really afraid to share it because I'm a guarded person, but I have to share it, but I'm afraid to share it. So I'm just not going to write a newsletter. Amazing.
Yeah,
I love
pretty
how
much.
it's beautiful, right? Like how the brain does this thing. And I'm saying, let's break it up into pieces and let's just do one piece at a time.
Right.
Because you can absolutely share your why, but your why, your deep, terrifying why that you really want to share could be in email number 2 or email number 7.
Gotcha.
There is no rule that says that you have to share your deepest secret in email number 1. That is not part of the best practices.
Yeah. You know, it's so funny because like, I don't know if it's my Catholic upbringing or what, but I like impose so many rules on myself. And the funny
Mhm.
thing is I went to like this group session, right? It was a kind of a therapy thing many years ago. And I realized that I don't like rules. And I actually shouted at somebody in front of everybody, which I don't like to do. And I'm like, oh, I guess when people tell me what to do, I get really pissed off. And the funny thing is I tell myself what to do all the time or what I should be
And
doing. It's hilarious.
you don't like that either because you don't like rules,
No,
period, even the ones that come from you, right? So
correct.
the more rules you impose on yourself, the more you shut
Hmm.
down.
Correct.
The more you go into rebel mode. Well, screw it, I'm not going to do anything then. Did I get that right?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So you notice that where kind of like liberation and movement forward lies is like, well, we're just going to take the rules away one by one, right? Like we're just going to question every rule and we're going to throw it over the shoulder.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that sounds fabulous. I mean, that statement alone, there's like been about, I don't know, half a dozen golden nuggets so far, and I hope I can remember them all, Kate.
Well, we're recording the call, so you won't have to remember.
Right. Yeah. So that feels amazing. One, because it gives me the time to be creative. Two, it takes the pressure off.
Mhm.
Three, it doesn't have a rule. It's just a conversation, really.
Mhm.
And it just, you know, and it's not one-sided because someone's going to be reading it, right?
Yeah.
And it may lead to future conversations. So yeah, that's liberating.
Tell me what else is missing, if anything. Like, do you have everything you need?
Well, do you want to come stay with me for a week and help me through the process? Then I would have everything I need.
That would be, well, let me ask you this. If I were able to do this, what would that give you? Like, what is it about me coming over and staying with you for a week that would be helpful?
Good train of thought. So I guess keeping me accountable, you
Mm,
know, I guess that's the other part of the equation that we might have talked about indirectly, but accountability to yourself, um, especially if you're used to quitting things because maybe
mhm.
you're afraid for whatever reason,
Right.
right? So if your go-to is to quit because you're afraid of something,
Mhm.
then it's hard to overcome that, maybe, right? So in theory, that would, you coming here would be like accountability,
I'm
not
here.
101,
I'm
but like
here.
accountability 501.
I'm watching you. I got your back, right? Go do that thing you said you want to do.
Right. Well,
I
then,
I don't think I need to physically be there to give you that though, because I think that's what coaches do generally, right? Like what you've just described is exactly what you already do for your clients. It's the
mhm,
accountability and support.
100%.
That like, hey, we talked about the thing. Let's break down the goals that you have. And then I will be right here cheering you on as you're now implementing the thing.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, I think that's golden nugget number what we counting?
Lost count. You're lost count. Well, so maybe that's, I think that is the last piece. You're right. Like, so how do we make sure this happens? How do I make sure there is accountability and support in place? So what would that look like for you, for me? Like, what would I need to do to help you do that? Is it ping you in a week? Once it's April, make sure that you're working on your draft. Message you and ask you, how are you doing? What?
Yeah, maybe just message me whenever the mood strikes.
Mhm.
Hey, how you doing? How is it going with the newsletter? That would be amazing.
And so you notice we have an implicit deadline for the newsletter.
Yeah.
Implicit because we've talked about frequency. So
Hmm.
your official deadline is the last day of April.
Yeah.
Like you could send it out as early as April 1st, but once like the end of April starts coming up, it's like that is your deadline. So I
Yeah.
think maybe what I will do, I will just tap you on the shoulder once we hit April
Yeah. That sounds wonderful.
and see where you at with your newsletter on gratitude, because we've already picked the dates, so you're not running now that we've already picked the topic, so you're not going down too many rabbit holes.
Yeah.
And I think the one other thing that I will suggest, if I may, in the next little while, because you do have this goal,
Hmm.
notice yourself going down rabbit holes.
Hmm.
Oh, intermittent fasting. Well, that's interesting. I should read a book about intermittent fasting. Oh, there is a podcast. When you watch yourself doing that, see if you can
Hmm.
actually catch yourself, pull up your phone, open
Hmm.
the file with the ideas for newsletter and say, intermittent fasting, look up podcasts and ideas, then put it aside and work on
Okay.
your newsletter on gratitude.
I love it. Yeah. I
Right?
love
So
it.
you kind of giving yourself like, you want to go down the rabbit hole on intermittent fasting? Great. But this thing has to be done first.
I love it.
And then
Yeah, it's
once it's
perfect.
done, you have your second idea for the month of May,
Hmm.
whatever that is. What's the second thing in your list? Let's take a look.
Okay.
What is
Um, oh, emotional eating versus real hunger.
Oh, do you remember putting that one down?
I do.
Okay. Is that something you've already gone on a rabbit hole on?
I've not. This is something. So I'm also being coached by Precision Nutrition.
Mhm.
Denise is my coach, who is
Yeah,
amazing.
she is
Yeah.
amazing.
So she posted a little excerpt from Janine Roth,
Yeah.
and it really resonated with me. So I saved it because it resonated with me, and I thought it might resonate with others.
So
So
here's something you notice that as soon as your April newsletter on gratitude is out,
mhm.
you just bought yourself some time to go
Yeah,
down the rabbit hole of emotional eating versus real hunger and exploring the difference because you're now working on your May newsletter.
right. Yeah, I love it.
That's your
I love
dessert.
it.
All right, my dear. I think we have a plan in place.
Thank you, Kate. It's been amazing talking to you. Oh no, you're frozen at the very end. I don't know if you can hear me, but you're frozen. Hello, hello. Oh boy, we're frozen. I'm reluctant to leave the meeting because I'd like to say goodbye. I'm not sure if you can hear me. Oh boy. Oh no. Crap. All right, Kate. I don't know. I lost you, but thank you in any case, if you can hear me still. Thank you for everything. It's been amazing talking to you and amazing value today speaking with you. Thank you. Have a great day. And I look forward to seeing you in all of the coaching corners, as well as you reaching out to me and helping me along the journey. Thank you.